Hi, everybody. Hope you can hear me. My name's Wei-Tai Kwok, and I'm joining you today from my hometown of Lafayette in Northern California in the Bay Area. And I'm really excited to be talking about what's actually one of my favorite topics, which is, of all things, heat pump water heaters. But before I jump in there, let me just tell you a little bit about myself, why I've got into this. Actually, the very first slide said that I was an electrification expert, and I have to chuckle because that's not correct. I'm actually an accidental electrification expert. I didn't grow up thinking I was going to be studying heat pump water heaters. But back in 2006, my wife and I went to see a documentary film called An Inconvenient Truth, which was a film about the climate crisis. And I remember walking out of the theater that day thinking, wow, if what we heard today was true, that the planet is warming and that humans are the likely cause, we don't have 100 years to solve this problem. And so it was at that time that I started to focus more about thinking about how could I and we all be part of the solution to the climate crisis, because at that time my kids were just 6 and 9 years old, and I thought it's going to be too late for them to take action. So I wanted to take action. But at that time in 2006, it seemed like the problem was so big and there were so few things that we could do. And so I actually was pretty depressed and got, sort of dark on that topic. But in any case, I resolved to start to try to find actions that I could take as an individual. And I went solar. I ended up getting an electric vehicle. And in 2019, I ended up electrifying my home and converting my gas water heater to a heat pump electric one. And so, over the last 15, 16 years, I've actually changed my view. And instead of thinking there's very little that we could do, I actually think there are dozens, if not hundreds of things that we can do to take action on climate. And so when people ask me, hey, Wei-Tai, you've been doing this for so long, what's the number one thing you think I should do to get started? I always say, get rid of your gas water heater. So that's why I'm particularly interested and happy to be here with you tonight. Thanks for taking time from your evening to be here. We're going to jump right in because we actually have some pretty exciting news that's come out in the last day that makes it even more exciting for all of us in California. There's more money on the table to make it easy for us to get started down this path. So let me just say that when we ask the question of why is Wei-Tai excited about using gas water heaters? And the answer is that, upgrading your water heater is very meaningful. It's a pretty heavy carbon footprint, and we find that 28% of a typical California's home energy use is coming from your water heater, as you could see on this chart. And so if you could switch that over to a clean, be powered by clean electricity, you're doing a big, making a big step for your home. So bigger than, about space heating, bigger than your air conditioner, bigger than your refrigerator, and so forth. So I want to share with you a story about how I converted my home away from natural gas. But since we don't have a lot of time today, I'm just going to focus on one appliance, which is that heat pump water heater. And being a person that likes to research things and study things, I actually started reading reports back in 2019 when I heard about the word building decarbonization or building electrification, words that are much more common today. But these were couple hundred pages of reports that I read to see whether or not it was economical to electrify my home. And I'll spare you the reading of a couple hundred pages to just give you the one sentence punchline, which was that for most new home construction, we find electrification of space and water heating and air conditioning reduces the homeowner's cost over the lifetime when compared with the fossil fuel equivalent. So that is for new home construction. If you go all electric, you're going to have the best return on your investment. The question was, for me, I already had a home. I wasn't building a new home. I was retrofitting my old home. What is the economics of that going to be? And these reports were actually not very clear. They said it all depends. How old is your home? How much energy to use? And then you would decide what your economics were. So I decided, well, let me just try and go get some bids and see what it was going to take to get rid of my appliances. Now, this is where I live, and I live in the suburbs and the home over there. So, and when I said, what are the gas appliances that I use in my house, I actually had 4 of them: gas furnace, gas hot water heater, gas cooktop, and a gas fireplace. And I actually got rid of all these in just 45 days and got into an all-electric zero-emission home. It was a lot easier than I had anticipated. But again, today we're just going to walk through the gas hot water heater portion of the experience. So today, what we're going to cover is our agenda. Let's talk about what is a heat pump water heater. Let's talk about what are the advantages, what are the challenges and issues, where do you install them in your house? Let's talk about costs and incentives that are out there. Then we'll talk about installers, and then we'll do some Q&A. And I would welcome you to go ahead and, if you ever have questions, you want to type it in the chat. I'll ask Jacqueline to read out some questions, and feel free to interrupt as we're going. We can pause if there are questions in the chat, Jacqueline. If there are a lot, I might not be able to stop for all of them, but you can dive in there as necessary. So yeah, just go ahead and feel free to type into the chat. That being said, when we talk about heat pump water heaters and their benefits, the number one thing is really that they're super energy efficient. If we take a look at water heaters, even though they all look the same on this slide, the one on the left, the gas one, which I used to have, most of them are 67 to 73% energy efficient. And mine actually was only 59%. But in the middle, there's a standard electric one that you plug in and it runs on a radiant coil. But the ones we're talking about are the ones on the right-hand side. These heat pump electrics can actually be 200 to 400% energy efficient. And by that, I mean for each 1 kilowatt in, you get 2 to 4 kilowatts of energy out. It's almost like magic. We're going to learn about that magic afterwards, but that's the main benefit. But let me start with a quiz and ask you guys to type in the chat to name an appliance in your home that uses heat pump technology, because we've used that word heat pump a lot so far. And I didn't actually know I've heard it a lot, but before 2019, I actually never really researched what it was. So type in the chat if you have an appliance in your home that you think uses heat pump technology. And Jacqueline, if you could read us some of the answers.
So before we go into the answers, someone had a question on how can you have more than 100% efficiency?
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. And the answer is because in gas, when you're combusting gas, you will have some losses due to combustion, but there's no combustion happening in a heat pump. And that's the magic of it. We're actually just moving heat from one place to another. And because there's no combustion, there are no losses. And through the magic of a refrigerant and pressure, that is really the secret of the heat pump, of why it can deliver more than 1 kilowatt hour and 1 kilowatt of energy. That's a great question, but there's no combustion. That's the technical answer. And we'll see a little video to explain that. Okay, read me some answers there.
Fridge, air conditioner, another refrigerator, fridge question mark, and then in-floor heating, refrigerator, and then heat pump heating and cooling.
Okay, well, those of you who said refrigerator and some of the others like air conditioning and so forth, you're right. But it turns out that all of us who have a refrigerator actually enjoy heat pump technology. If you think about how a refrigerator works, the heat pump in the refrigerator takes the heat from inside the refrigerator and pumps it out. And that makes it cooler and cooler and cooler. It makes it freezing cold inside, right? And if you actually walked in front of your refrigerator with your bare feet, you might feel heat on your toes because that's the heat coming out from inside. So heat pumps pump heat from one place to another, and heat pumps that work in reverse you can actually pump heat from outside and go in. And that's actually what a water heater is. It actually is the inverse of your refrigerator, because it takes heat from your room and then it pumps it into the water inside the tank. Okay, so you can think of a heat pump water heater as the reverse of your refrigerator's technology. And so with that, let me show you this 60-second clip to explain it, all right? And they'll do a better job than me.
Heat pump water heaters use the heat and humidity from room air to heat water stored in an insulated tank, making them much more efficient than standard electric water heaters. A fan pulls room air across an evaporator coil, transferring heat from the air into refrigerant in the coil. The heat turns the refrigerant into a vapor. A compressor compresses the vapor and pumps it through condenser coils that are wrapped around the tank. After transferring heat to the water in the tank, the refrigerant turns back into a liquid and the process repeats. Like standard electric water heaters, the heat pump has upper and lower heating elements that operate automatically when the room is too cold for the heat pump to work efficiently, or when there's a larger than normal demand. Since heat pump water heaters produce condensation, a condensation drainage system is needed. In some cases, a condensation pump is used to remove condensate.
All right. Well, that was a quick video. There was a lot packed in there. So I just want to restate a couple things. Number one, what they talked about in terms of that we talked about a hybrid heat pump just now. And that's very important because a hybrid heat pump has two things. It has a heat pump on top, which I mentioned runs at 200 to 400% efficiency. But then he mentioned that when the room is too cold or there is larger than normal demand, it has this upper element and lower element below. And what he means by that, it's like a radiant element, like those old style cooktops on your stove that turn red when you run electricity through it. And that can boil water and heat it up much faster than the heat pump, but it runs only at 100% energy efficiency. So these hybrid ones actually sort of have the best of both worlds, that it uses a heat pump most of the time at high efficiency, but it can kick in if you have guests come over and you have 10 people who want to take a shower all of a sudden, and that really take a hit, so that it'll step in with the radiant element. Okay, so that's what a hybrid version of a heat pump is. Now, it turns out these days, if you get one of these new heat pump water heaters, they come with an app to control your water heater. You download the app and you can adjust it to typically 4 different modes. Here's just an example I listed on the left. The operating modes: number 1, heat pump only mode is the maximum consumer savings. So this is the best way to just save the most money. But hybrid mode, which I just talked about, it saves when you're experiencing fast recovery, but you can if you have some quick demand, it'll switch automatically there. You could go to electric only mode. Don't know why you'd want to do this and override the heat pump, but you could. And vacation mode, of course, if you're out of town, you can just set it down to a cooler temperature. So this is something new. I didn't have this obviously with our gas water heaters, but now they're getting a lot smarter and you can control it with your phone. There are two form factors, really. The one on the left is where the heat pump water heater is all in one unit. You can see it, that picture over there on the left-hand side. This case shows like it's inside the house and it needs some louvered doors to get its air into it. And then on the right-hand side actually is the unit that I have, where the tank and the heat pump are separate. In this case, this is a picture of an 83-gallon tank in my house. And then the heat pump unit is outside, maximum 50 feet in this case, and it's getting the heat from outside and sending it into the house to warm up the air. Okay, so that hopefully is a quick look into what is a heat pump water heater. Let's go to the next topic of what are the advantages of a heat pump water heater system. Well, turns out, when you don't have gas, you don't have gas pollution, you don't have any carbon dioxide pollution. So that's much better for the climate. You also don't have carbon monoxide pollution too, because you can see at the top of a gas water heater, there's a vent that's venting out the burning of the gases, but sometimes those gases could enter your home. And if they did, that would be something that it'd be like running your car in your garage with the garage door down. You'd suffocate yourself with carbon monoxide. So that's a picture of my carbon monoxide monitor, which is recommended to be put near your gas water heater in case there's buildup. Then you'd have an alarm that says, hey, this odorless, and you don't want to suffocate. So those are obviously the health reasons to get rid of it. But as I mentioned before, if you can go all electric, then electric appliances can be powered by 100% renewable energy. And so that's really the goal of what we're trying to do in California, is get rid of our fossil fuel appliances and move to clean electric appliances. So those are some of the clear advantages of using them, in addition to the energy efficiency and the cost that I've already mentioned. Now, there are challenges and issues, and so let me share some of those with you. First of all, most of these need a 240 volt outlet with a 30 amp breaker, and typical where you got your gas current heater, that it's not likely going to have that. And so therefore you may need a plumber and an electrician, two trades to come do it, or a general contractor who can do both. Sometimes when you call the plumber, then the plumber has a partner who's an electrician, and then they can handle it for you. Another question is there enough room in your electrical panel? Will you need a service panel upgrade to have, 30 amps and the 240 volts? That's a challenge. And but as a partial solution to that, there are new 120 volt, 15 amp units that are arriving on the market. That was the picture. The very first picture that Jacqueline showed you was a picture of me standing next to a 120 volt model that I saw in Atlanta just in February of this year. So it is in the marketplace. Now, another challenge is that these heat pump water heaters do generate cold air and they dehumidify. Just like I told you, your refrigerator in your kitchen generates hot air. Hey, that's great in the wintertime, but in the summertime, it's less great. And the inverse is true with your heat pump water heater. It's great to generate some cold air in the summertime, but it is cooling your house down in the wintertime as well, if you're venting it into your house. So a typical device needs a minimum room size of 7 feet by 10 feet by 10 feet. So that's got that, or louvered doors, like I showed you in the picture. The air can be ducted from elsewhere. You could get your air from outside the house by putting ducts on the machine. And as the video mentioned, you need to run a condensate line or a condensate pump. Just like when we drive our cars with the air conditioning on in the summer and there's water dripping from underneath after we've driven it for a while, that's the same with what happens here. It'll drip water, and you're going to have to do something with the water. It can't just drip on the floor wherever it is. It needs to go into a drain or be pumped out. Also, there's an air filter that needs to be cleaned periodically. That's not something you do in your gas product. Also, it's louder than a gas water heater, like a refrigerator. Go stand near your refrigerator and see how much noise it makes, right? So it's going to make more noise than the gas water heater, but not too much. Also, another challenge is that many of the plumbers I first tried to talk to about going with a heat pump, they said, oh, don't do that. And they try to talk you back into using your gas. Why do you want to do a heat pump? It's expensive, blah, blah, blah. Or they try to talk you into a tankless. But a tankless is also gas, so that's not really fulfilling our purpose here. So these are some of the challenges. All of them are overcomeable, but these are things that you may run into as you're about to do your project. Now, I do want to show you a comparison of water heaters, just to give you an idea. Starting on the left, a typical family of 4 may currently have a 50-gallon gas water heater. And if you're one of those and you're thinking of upgrading to heat pump, you might size up to like 55 or 60 gallons, just so you'll have a little bit of that extra capacity if you're doing a hybrid heat pump version. So, and in my case, I have that 83-gallon tank, so I size up even more because I don't have a hybrid. I just have a standard straight up heat pump. These on the right have the highest energy efficiency, but they're more efficient because they're slower to generate. They're more slower to generate the heating in the water tank. So if you have a bigger tank size, though, that compensates for that recovery time. So generally speaking, shifting from gas to heat pump, you would probably upsize a little bit depending on which model you go with, and your plumber can advise you on this. It also will depend how much space you have in the place where you're going to put your heat pump water heater. Okay, but just plan to size up. And that leads us to the question of, where do you install your new heat pump water heater? Well, the first thing to know that air source heat pumps get their heat from the air, so they need air, right? And I mentioned before, a room that's 10 by 10 with a 7-foot ceiling is a typical minimum size. There's a picture on the right-hand side of a heat pump in a garage. That's an excellent place because that's a big enough space and it can cool your garage down, which is nice, especially in California here. If you're in a garage, that's a great place. Otherwise, if your current heat pump is indoors and you're going to need some louvered doors or ducts. So this picture on the below actually is both. It's actually got a louvered door, but you could see the ducting system of the air coming in and going out. So this is, just to show both of them at the same time. Finally, for those of us here in the Bay Area, the Bay Area climate is fine to put your heat pump water. Some people have them outside. My sister-in-law is in El Cerrito, and her water heater's outside, but that's a great place also because there's plenty of air outside. Now, let's talk about the exciting part of costs and incentives, all right? Because there's some really new news to talk about today. And when we talk about costs, let's break it down. What's going to cost you to change out? Well, I went on to a website yesterday to just double check how much does it cost to buy the model on the left in either 50, 65, or 80 gallon sizes. And it retails online for, say, $1,900, $2,300, $2,900, depending on the size. And so that's the cost of the water heater itself. But then the labor to put it in, plus running all that new electrical, the typical installed cost in California is running around $6,000 or so, right? So you're going to double the actual cost of the water heater. If you're handy and you can do it yourself, you may be able to get away with just the cost in the orange box, but a plumber is likely to charge you around $6,000. But the really good news here today is that there's a lot of rebates, incentives, tax credits, sorted to the tune of $2,000 to $7,500 that you can access depending on what city, what county, where you live in California. You're going to get different rebates based on who your utility is, and maybe your city pitches in as well. So it really varies, and you have to do a little bit of your homework in your own city. But let me just start at the top level and the federal level and share the news that the Inflation Reduction Act, which passed Congress last August of 2022, included the heat pump water heater stimulus money for that. And specifically at the bottom, you can see there's a 30% federal tax credit up to $2,000 per household per year for a heat pump water heater. So again, on $6,000, that 30% of $6,000 is $1,800 federal tax credit available. This is going to be available for the next 10 years, starting from January 1st of this past year. So anybody, if you've already bought one, you could file in your tax return next year for this tax credit. If you did it before 2023, January 1st, then you can't. But for 10 years, that's a wonderful thing to get that. Now, the other really exciting news is that yesterday on Halloween, so trick or treat, this is a real treat for all of us. The state of California announced that the Tech Clean California plan had come in with some super generous incentives. And I just want to share a little bit of this chart with you and to focus your attention on residential unitary. That means for residential homeowners, a single unit, like I've shown you pictures of, that those are eligible. General market people can get $3,100 off. And for equity, meaning income qualified folks who are on the CARE program or federal income programs, can get more, $4,185 for the installed costs. So that's not just the hardware, but also the labor and the total installed cost charged by a plumber. In addition, if you're installing a tank 55 gallons or greater, okay, so that 55 or that 80 gallon tank, there's an additional $700 incentive for either way. There's some other information here. The electric panel upgrade, you could see $2,000 and $4,000 if you have to upsize your panel. That these are very generous upgrades as well. So that's really good news. So let me break it down in a chart just to show you how those two incentives alone match up. If you wanted to change your gas water heater with another gas water heater, and typically, by the way, water heaters last for about 10 to 15 years, and then they rust out and leak. And so many people 99% of water heaters are exchanged on an emergency basis when it's like, oh my gosh, it's cold water. I can't take a shower. I've got to get the plumber to come right away. And so the plumber will run over and say, I can swap this immediately, a gas for gas. And how much would you pay? Well, the purchase price typically $1,000, installation $800. So you're probably at $1,800. There are no rebates. There are no federal tax credits. You pay $1,800. I think it might be $2,000 now, but anyways, something on that order of magnitude. Now, if you want to do an electric heat pump like I've been showing you, let's just take a purchase price of around $2,500, sort of the average of the three numbers I gave you before. And you can see the installation cost is going to be a lot more, as I mentioned, $3,500 to be about $6,000 instead of $1,800. So that's sort of the bad news is, wow, it's triple the price. But as we heard a little bit earlier, the Peninsula Clean Energy is offering a $2,000 rebate. There's another Bay Area organization called BayREN that offers $400. And then that Tech Clean California rebate announced yesterday is $3,100. So when you pile all those incentives together, you're actually only paying $500 for that $6,000 water heater. And guess what? I haven't even put in the federal tax credit of 30%. So when we add that down in the bottom, 30% of 150, then you're getting basically $350. So would you like to have a $350 advanced electric, or would you like to replace your gas for gas? I hope everybody would say, wow, this is a no-brainer. And now, let me add one more column here for income qualified Californians to see what the benefit would be for that group. And again, the water heater being $6,000, but Peninsula Clean Energy has a $1,000 adder, so it's $3,000 here. And the Tech Clean program adds yet another $1,085. So when you add that all together, you're actually getting you're getting paid to take a water heater, $1,585, right? So people, again, in this last column, they're not even paying for it. They're getting paid for it. Now, I should caveat this by saying this is all brand new news from yesterday, and I furiously read as much as I could to try to prepare for today's presentation just on the new Tech Clean program and to make sure whether these rebates are stackable. That means, can I get all three at once, or do they cancel each other out? And Vanessa confirmed that at least for Peninsula Clean Energy, for BayREN and Tech Clean, they are stackable. What some programs are that they're stackable except up to the maximum purchase price of $6,000. So you can get to zero, but you cannot get more than zero, like negative $1,585. But there are other programs that say it's fine for you to stack on top. And yes, we will pay you in your pocket $1,585 to change. So I didn't get to see the fine print to exclude that. So I'm thinking you could get $1,585, but if I'm wrong, please excuse me. It's just really new information that's still starting to come out. So it's I think this is correct, but let's hope it is. And so keep with me just through this example. Not only is it cheaper to buy a hot water heater, electric hot water heater, but to run it over time, it's actually, remember I told you 200 to 400% energy efficient. So when you compare the upfront cost of these units, but then you compare the annual fuel costs, in this case, you can do that by looking at the yellow Energy Star tag. In this case, the model I showed you, you can download it and see $104 a year. This is just a national average of electricity prices. So I plug in 104, and then I grab like a typical gas 50-gallon one, 239. It's actually, gas prices are much more expensive now. So this number is actually much higher. But when you calculate your total cost of ownership in year 1, year 5, year 10, year 15, you can see that in the typical life of 10 or 15 years, the gas one is costing you $5,385 total cost of ownership after 15 years. And in the middle column, your total cost of ownership was $1,910. And in the last column on the right, you're still up by $25, meaning the $1,585 that you got actually helped pay for 15 years of electricity bills. So you're really getting not only a free hot water, but you're getting it free for 15 years. So that's really amazing. Now, this is just an illustrative example. Yeah, read the fine print. This is just trying to give you an example of rough numbers, of rough concepts of how these work. And it will vary by county. And this is just a peninsula for people who are in the San Francisco Bay Area serviced by Peninsula Clean Energy and can get their $2,000 incentive. Up in Marin County, for example, they're also quite generous with $1,000 or $2,000 incentives, and it varies all over, and you'll just have to check. But at the moment, I think the juiciest are people on the in San Mateo County, the peninsula. Now, let me shift and just back to my house and share with you that I told you that in 2019, I switched from a gas plus electric house and got rid of all my gas and went to an all electric home. And when I did do that in 2020, after 12 months in my house, I collected 5 years of my PG&E bills and analyzed to see what my ultimate energy costs were. And you could see that my energy costs, roughly about 1,000 or a little more than 1,000 previously. My electric bill was way bigger, but since I had no more gas bill, my total energy cost was slightly less than all my previous 4 years. And then since then, every anniversary I've measured, and the numbers have stayed low. So at least for me, life in an all electric house is economically better. I'm better off. My bills have not risen, as you can see here. Now, I want to leave you with resources of how you can do this with yourself. When you leave today's talk and you want to see what the incentive is for you, and I mentioned it's different in every place in the Bay Area and every place in California, this is the website I go to get my information. The switch is on, switcheson.org. So please write that down. I'll keep it on the screen here a little bit. The idea, obviously, is this is a site hosted by the Building Electrification Coalition, and they are advocating for switching from gas to electric. And you can type in your zip code and you will find these incentives that are available to you in your city. And it will also give you a list of contractors who are participating contractors and who have access and who are knowledgeable about these incentives. So it's best to find one of those, because those are people who are not likely to try to encourage you to go to gas like I had that experience. They're likely to accommodate your request to go all electric. So let's talk about those installers for a second, because those are a key part of your success. I want to share a case study of a family on the Peninsula Burlingame, the Yang family, a friend of mine, and to share their experiences, because they said really the hardest part was to find the right contractor. They had an example where their existing 50-gallon gas unit, it failed May 2021. And so, for 12 days, they had no hot water. They did not want to switch gas for gas. And so it took them a while to find the right contractor, because several of them were trying to just say, please just replace gas for gas, but they knew they did not want to do it. The plumber recommended the Bradford White 65-gallon heat pump water heater, which you see a picture on the right, which, as you can see, it's in their garage. And as you can see, they upsized from the 50-gallon to the 65-gallon, right? And location garage, perfectly good. And they had to add 240-volt wiring, which tend to be a little bit easier to do in the garage for access reasons. So, after they got it done, they said it was a really seamless transition over to electric. We can't tell the difference. We have plenty of hot water. So they were very happy with making the cutover. So my recommendation is, if your water heater is 10 years old or more or older, don't wait for it to leak, right? You don't want to go 12 days with no hot water. You don't want to go looking for a contractor at the last moment. Be proactive. Being successful with today's webinar, and if you've learned anything about wanting to do this, you're going to have to change out your water heater before it dies. And being proactive is really the name of the game. So if you want to go after this call and go to check your water heater, look for the manufacturing date. There'll be a sticker on your water heater that says when it was made. And if it was 10 years old or more, then definitely you're right to change. And even if it's 9 or 8 or 7, because of the great price and incentives that's available now, you may also choose to change. Okay. So remember, if you go to the switcheson.org and you type in your zip code, or you'll see a dot map of all the installers in the state of California, but then you'll see the actual ones near to you. So as the next step, check out your current water heater. As I said, 10 years or older, think about upgrading soon. go ahead and identify some qualified local installers. They can give you bids and quotes to see what the number is. Hopefully it's sort of around that $6,000 number. You know, these days with inflation, things tend to be trending up. So it might be higher, and you might have a larger tank or a more difficult installation, or you might have an easier one and it might be less, but that's sort of the average. But you do want to act soon because funds are limited. That $3,100 Tech Clean budget, that was a program that was around before, and it was so popular that it got exhausted in like 6 months and all the money was gone. And then it's been more than a year that there's been no money in that bucket. And so funds are limited, at least on that piece, and even on the Peninsula Clean Energy piece. These programs run until the budgets run out. The only one that's there for a while is that federal one for 10 years, the 30% up to $2,000. Okay, so with that, guess what? We've gotten to the question section. So I'm gonna stop sharing and we're gonna take your questions by chat. You can raise your hand and ask your question live, and Jacqueline is gonna moderate for us.
Gregory said, okay, still seems like it's a problem with second law. And there
Is
was
it
a
a problem with the second home or a principal residence? I think, is that the
That
question?
was law. That was the answer.
Oh, okay.
okay. Thank you. And then can one have a consolidated heat pump system that does central heating and hot water heating?
Okay, so far I've been talking about heat pump water heaters that are just heating the water that you wash your hands and take a shower with. But the questioner has asked, can you use a heat pump that not only heats up your water, but that heats up your house as well? And the answer is yes. That's in Europe, that's actually quite common, but we have not really seen so much of that technology in the US. There is a Bay Area company called Harvest Thermal that does offer that product. So harvestthermal.com is my guess what their URL is. And so if you're interested in that product and having one heat pump that does multiple services, water and space heating, then that's one company that I'm aware of. But there are many companies that in Europe, at least, that are doing that. So it's not a crazy idea. It's a good idea.
And the next question is a condensation drain required with the split heat pump setup? Does the condensation drain
That's
from
a great
the
question.
tank
So
or the outdoor unit?
yep. Remember I talked about condense it, like your car air conditioning drips water. So when you had the split unit, I showed you a picture of my house where it had the tank inside and the air source heat pump is outside. And so the water drips outside already. And that's great. So I don't need a drain since it's just dripping onto the dirt outside my house.
And then Mark asked a question, will I need a tank? Currently, I have a OnDemand gas unit outside the house. Sounds like I need to find a place to place a tank.
Yes, that's a great question. I do get a lot of questions about on-demand, instant, and those are all gas. There are some versions of on-demand electric, but it requires so much electricity that it's just not economical to do that for a whole house hot water heating. There are on-demand water heaters that if you have a sink in a very far part of your house, instead of running all the copper piping to that sink, you could do an on-demand for hand washing because we're only turning it on for 20 seconds. And then it could, there's such on-demand electric for hand washing, but not for showering, not for a bathtub, that's not there. So if you're doing your whole house and not just a remote sink, then you are going to you're going to convert back to a tank if you were to get rid of your instant gas. Tankless, you would go back to a tanked heat pump version.
The next question is, what if your room is cold?
What if your room is cold? Yes. So I did show you pictures and I said that this is the heat pump water heater's reverse of your refrigerator. So it's going to put out cold rather than putting out hot. So you do have to think about that. This all depends on the size of your house and where it is, but I've heard that the degree of cooling is like 1 degree, 2 degrees, not like 10 degrees. So it's not going to take your 70-degree house down to 60, maybe just down a degree. Very unscientific, sorry. But if you're worried about it, then you would want to try to do that ducted version where you duct some outside air directly into your heat pump. There was a picture of that. And so you could do ducting into the room. But your plumber will be able to get into the details based on your actual house, right? But just so that I'm glad you're already thinking about these issues, because now when the plumbers mention it, you'll be able to know what these issues are and how to try to troubleshoot it in your own house.
And the next question is, can you run from outside air in the summer and inside air in the winter?
That's a great question. And the answer is yes. There are, I've seen some heat pumps where they have a manual valve for the duct where you, in the summertime, you let the air come from inside your house, and in the winter you flip the switch, and then it connects to a duct that pulls in outside air, right? So as long as you remember in the winter, I mean in the fall to click it one way, in the spring to do it the other, then you get free air conditioning. Again, 1 degree, not like 10 degrees, but it helps a little. So yes, some have the ducted the valves that you can buy separately.
And the next question is, are there models that don't require as much space, 7 by 10 by 10, maybe in the future?
Well, that's the reason the reason that there's the split version that I had where the machine is outside and the tank is inside. That's one way that you don't need a certain size room. The other way is I just mentioned where you can be in a very small closet, but you have a duct that leads outside. So if the small closet is adjacent to an outside wall, maybe a crawl space or something, I don't know if you want to use attic air, but if you can run a duct to the unit, then you don't have to be in a 7-foot by 10-foot by 10-foot room, because you're ducting to the outdoors, which is way bigger than that. And again, your plumber will be able to advise you on this when they see your current location of your water heater.
And the next question is, are heat pump water heaters allowed and recommended in manufactured homes?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that. I would think it should be fine because there's not even any flames. It should be even, flameless. But as to if it's your principal residence, I think from a tax point of view, I'm not your tax advisors, but you can get the 30% tax credit on your principal residence. And a good question of reading the fine print for Peninsula Clean Energy. Maybe Vanessa can chime in of whether a mobile home is eligible for the 2,000, or is it other type? What homes are eligible? I don't know to put you on the spot, but if you happen to know the answer, feel free to chime in. And by the way, I see some other experts here in the chat answering questions. I appreciate all that. And, if you're getting questions in the chat and seeing answers, so much the better.
Next question is, so the tax rebate is on the total after the rebates rather than the purchase price and installation? Okay,
fantastic question. So this question, let me say it in a different way. It's like if we pretend the installed cost is $6,000, do you get the 30% tax credit on the $6,000, which is $1,800, and then you can take all the other incentives? Or do you have to apply the $2,000 Peninsula Clean Energy and then the $3,100, and you get it down to $500, and then can you only apply, like I did in that example, the 30% to that lowest number of $500? And the answer is somewhere in between. I think I've talked to a number of accountants on this topic, and there is some very specific language on this, but it's quite complicated. And I have not yet been able to get a CPA to publish an article to explain what should be a very simple point. And so I don't want to give tax advice in this, but I just took the most conservative approach in the example I gave you above. But you can ask your CPA and tax advisor, and there's a chance that they will come to the conclusion that you can apply that to the $6,000 up front, because certain state incentives, or certain types of incentives, are not considered within the the basis of what they call it. So you can count it against it. But let me just say, check with your tax advisor. There is a chance you could apply it to a number greater than the $500 I talked about. A good chance.
And the next question is still not sure if the upfront cost of the purchase is what we are talking about, or I hope I pronounced this word correctly, amortized over life.
Amortized. Amortized. Okay. Does somebody want to? Whoever asked the question, if you can. You want to come on air and ask that, because I'm not sure.
Greg Slater, thank you. I think this was answered by a combination of chat and yourself, but I think you gave in your tables. But I was initially trying to figure out whether you, whether you had to put in a lot of upfront costs and then reclaim it over time via taxes and whatnot.
Oh, okay. The Vanessa can maybe explain, when do you get the $2,000? How soon? What's the timing of getting for PCE? What's the timing of getting the money?
Sure. Yes, I was just fiercely typing in the chat a response to the mobile home question, and we'll send that in a second. But for Peninsula Clean Energy, our rebate process is pretty simple. First, you will plan out your project, identify a contractor, and then do your installation. And then at that point, you would submit your information to us on our website, and then we would send you a rebate. So for our program, it is after your installation.
Okay, very good. And for every program, it'll be a little different on the timing. I think the Tech Clean rebate, by the way, that big $3,100 check, it actually goes to your contractor, but the contractor is required to pass through 100% of the rebate to the consumer. So that to me means that if they bid $6,000, that they'll give you an invoice for $6,000 minus $3,100, right? And then you would still separately get the $2,000 from Peninsula Clean Energy through whatever means they do it, and separately, the Bay run $400. So you probably have to work at it, but they're different pots of money with different rules. And again, the best place is to go switcheson.org, because it'll tell you which incentives and rebates are available in your city.
And the next question is, any challenges with reliability, any circumstances where it may not produce hot water?
Well, any examples of problems with reliability? I did actually, within a few weeks of installation, there were times that my water was not hot. So I did have to call the plumber to come back and say, hey, when I was showering, it suddenly went cold. What's the issue here? And it turned out like I had set the temperature on my unit a little too low. By the way, the factory default for water is 120 degrees Fahrenheit. When we take a shower, typically the water hitting our skin is maybe 95 to 105 degrees. Anything warmer is really scalding already. But in my particular unit, I needed to set it to 140 in order for it to have consistent. That was, again, 2019. So ever since that, first month of tweaking it, it was fine for me. I haven't had problems. I don't think that again, refrigerators use the exact same technology. So you could say, how much trouble has your refrigerator been giving you? And these are somewhat of the same heat pump technology. They're known technologies, not something really new.
And this next question is about switches on. Does it give all available incentives and rebates for my location? Gregory asked.
Yes, that's a great thing. Go ahead and try to type it in now and take a look, but you'll see a long list of all the different, they're even more than what I showed you. And so there's even more money, at least for Peninsula residents. I didn't want to complicate my talk too much, but there's a Golden State rebate as well.
Well, I guess I was just, is it comprehensive? In other words, they have all these rebates consolidated or listed, and they figure everything you can possibly get when you enter your location. But that's the situation.
They're trying. They're a nonprofit organization, and they have staff that are working to try to do the entire state of California, which is a pretty hard task. And
Yeah, I get it.
they, as of yesterday, Halloween, they had by midnight already did all the 3100 and 3800, so they were on it. But I'm not promising that they'll know everything in every place. But that for me, that's still my go-to site in what is a very complicated statewide thing to try to keep up with every single municipality starting and stopping their benefits. So is it likely to be 100% correct all the time? No. But is it the best resource that I've seen in the state? Absolutely, by far.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And the next question is the 3,500 installation cost a one-time cost? Future installations cost less? Initial conversion cost?
Okay, so the example I gave was is $6,000 all in, meaning I gave an example of buying the hot water. The plumber buys it for $2,500, and then they charge you $3,500 in installation charges, and that's a one-time upfront. I mean, maybe the plumber will do some financing and spread it out over time, but typically I've seen it as that's what you have to pay that all up front, but you get those incentives up front also. And so it is just a one-time. You're not paying it again later.
And the next question is, will electric water heaters only last about 10 years?
That's a good question. How long will these last? And I think the expected lifetime is going to be about that 10-year period, but these are fairly new into the marketplace. I mean, mine is already 5 years old. I guess maybe I was amongst a little bit of the early adapters, but they are designed. They do have more moving parts than the gas one, which has no moving parts essentially. So it will really depend. I think that you can look at the warranties, ask your plumbers and so forth, but the expectation is that they would be comparable. But they do have more moving parts. That you have to clean the fans. If you don't clean the fans, they might not perform as well. So you're supposed to do that with your refrigerator too, like vacuum off the coils. I don't think I've done that before, but yeah, you're supposed to maintain them a little bit.
And then someone had a question about incentives in Palo Alto, but you did provide us with the link of the switches on.
The switches on. Okay, so Palo Alto is a muni, so that's not within Peninsula Clean Energy.
Okay.
So people who live in Palo Alto muni, Vanessa, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they get access to your $2,000 credit. But Palo Alto has its own heat pump water program, and the program I just said that started yesterday on Halloween is a statewide program for single-family for residential homeowners. Everybody, even Palo Alto residents, can get the $3,100.
So there was another question on reliability, temperature, evenness of temp compared to gas and electric.
I have on the one hand, remember the Yang family at Burlingame, and they said they could tell no difference between their heat pump water heater and their gas. It was absolutely indistinguishable, and that's been my experience too. Can't tell the difference because the tank is set, in my case, to 140 degrees. Most of the hybrid tanks are set to 120, which is already scalding. And so it's the same temperature water coming out. You would not really feel a difference.
The next question is, how does the 120 volt heat pump water heater model performs compared to the one that uses 220 volts?
Okay. So 120 volts versus the 240 volts, it's not going to be as fast, right? And so that's why the tank size might need to be bigger. Maybe if you're a two-person household, and you can heat up a whole, 60 gallons, you're probably never going to use that much hot water, even if you had 4 guests over and you all decided to shower at the same time. So if you had a 6-person family and everybody was an athlete and you were showering all the time, then 120 is probably not going to keep up with you. For this reason, I was told by the manufacturer that they are focusing their sales of the 120 volt in Southern California, where the climate is warmer. And so as compared to someplace in Northern California, you can get pretty cold still. And so there's less ambient air to get heat when it's cold. When it's hot in Southern California, it's easier. So I don't know the popularity of 120 volts in Northern California yet, but again, if you're a small family size, and it's a possibility for you.
So the next question is, how likely is it that the noise would be an issue if the heat pump water heater is in the garage adjacent to the living room? And then someone commented under there, how many decibels is the typical noise?
Yeah, I think the decibel range I've seen, okay, my memory's bad on this, but somewhere like 45 to 55 decibels. And they do vary. Some are a little bit, higher than others. And you can read the specification sheet. And if your plumber comes, usually a plumber is usually associated with a couple brands, not every brand. And so you can ask for the spec sheet and ask the decibel level.
And then there was another question about recommendations for manufactured homes, but you already answered it.
Yep.
I just wanted to address it again.
Or Vanessa probably answered it better than I
Yeah.
did.
And then the next question is, this was addressed, but again, with Central, it seems you waste water and time waiting for hot water to get to you. There's no way around this?
Okay, so the question is maybe from a person who has an instant gas tankless, where they're only creating hot water at the time of use to come out for you. Maybe is that the question? So that
Well, it's actually, I'm sorry, it's actually that I currently with my gas hot water heater centralized with a central thing, you got cold water in the pipes, and every time you use it, you've got to drain out the cold, push the cold water over the hot, and it just seems like a waste of water and energy and time. And is that? And now I did get an answer from someone on the chat saying there are ways around this, but I just wondered if the heat pump address is better or the same for that problem.
There's no difference for that problem of water, cold water in the pipe, right? Because the tank is the same hot water tank. It's just how it got hot. Did it get hot from a gas source, or did it get hot from a heat pump source? But when I got mine installed in 2019, my plumber offered me a push button solution to that question, where you push a button in at the sink that you're at, and it sends a signal to a motor to circulate the cold water back into the tank and bring hot water to your tap, so that the hot water comes out and you don't waste the cold water.
Right.
So there are these push button systems that were not too expensive, actually. And so go ahead and raise that exact issue with your plumber. And I think at least my plumber offered me a solution, which I did not take it. And it turns out, for some magical reason, my particular unit, the water that comes out instantly is actually very warm already. I cannot explain why, but it's not supposed to happen that way, but it does. But your problem that you just described is very common, and there are solutions.
Thank you.
Great question.
And the next question is, if the heat pump water heater is in the garage without a drain, how to release the condensation, run pipe to outside, as into a French drain, like a hole?
Yeah, so for people in a garage, if you have yours in a garage today, you probably have it elevated like 1 or 2 feet above the floor. And that elevation already provides enough drop for the condensate to put in a PVC pipe and be run over to outside and drill a hole through the wall, and the pipe goes out your garage. That I think would be the typical solution. And if for some reason you were actually on the floor and there was no drop to drain, then, like the video said, in some cases you need a condensate pump. So it would drain into a little container, and then there'd be a mechanical pump that pumps the water through a pipe that goes out to someplace outside your house. And that might just water a plant or something. It's not massive amounts of water. It's just not something you'd want it pooling up in your garage.
And the next question, if the heat pump is installed outside and the air quality is poor, will the interior air quality be negatively impacted in any way?
Okay, so the question, I think, could you, if the heat pump is outside and the air quality is bad, well, the whole thing is outside. So the heat pump air filter, remember I told you that needed cleaning. So maybe it'll need more cleaning if we have more wildfires like that. But the pollution from that does not enter your house, right? Because only what's entering your house is the hot water, and the hot water is not touching the pollution. So if your hot water heater's inside your house and you did the solution of putting the duct to the outside, then the outside polluted, wildfire air comes in. Shouldn't be leaking out. It will, the heat from the wildfire smoke will heat up your water, but then it'll be vented back outside again. So it just comes into your house, but goes out again. So I don't think in any of those cases you would have, pollution introduced from your hot water heater.
And I'm scrolling through the chat. So where do we find information on the income qualifications? Okay, Vanessa answered that question. Thank you. And then switches on. Okay, we already answered that question as well.
These are great questions.
Yeah.
Everybody. I'm so glad you're asking, because these are, and thank you, Cooper at Quit Carbon, for answering a lot of these. I know Quit Carbon is a company that offers advice services for people who want to make the switch to all electric, and they have expertise on how to do it. And I think it's no charge to the customer. I think they receive their fee from the plumbers and the service providers. So that's also a source of information. But yep, I'm sort of monitoring the chat a little, but I really appreciate Jacqueline for asking. If anybody wants to ask the questions live, you can just raise your hand and ask a question live as well.
Also, if I accidentally skip your question, but to answer the chat question, we're currently recording, so it'll be in the recording, but if you do want to, I can download the chat questions. So the next question is sacrificial anodes.
So the question of the sacrificial anode, and that is something, because a typical water heater, remember I told you they rust out at their end of life. Why do they rust? Because water rusts, helps to rust things. But if you put a piece of metal in, and they actually call it an anode, and they call it a sacrificial, so that the rust is actually rusting out the anode first. It attacks the anode before it attacks the sides of your water heater. So if you're a good over the 10-year life of your water heater, and you checked every 2 years or 3 or 5 years, whatever the hardness of your softness of your water, if the anode is all disintegrated because it's been attacked, and you have to take it out, replace it, and you keep replacing it every couple of years, then your gas water heater or any water heater will not rust out because the anode got sacrificed first. Right. But so then the question is, well, is there a sacrificial anode also in heat pump water heaters? And I asked this question when I was at I talked to the reps, and the answer was, at least for that brand, yes. It's much harder to get to because the heat pump is sitting on top of the tank, and that's how you'd have to sort of take open up the heat pump, get to the rod, and pull it out. So do it yourself, a little bit harder than on a gas, but theoretically it can be done. In the case of the product I bought, which is that 2-piece version, my tank is a stainless steel tank. Stainless steel means no rust, so it has no sacrificial anode, and I think mine is going to last forever because it's stainless steel. All right, let's, for variety, take Barbara's raised hand.
Yeah.
And ask Barbara to come on screen and ask a question.
Thank you. There are there's so much amazing information in the chat. Is it possible to get a printout of that chat, or to have it sent along with the video?
Yes, I'll download
that would be
chat.
great, because there is a wealth of information, and I'm wasting all my time trying to capture it when I'd really rather just listen to you people discuss the programs and so forth. So
all of you can save the chat right now by going into where you type the chat. You can see a smiley face, a file, and then a ... that says more. If you do the ... and click it, you can click the word save chat, and it'll save everything up to that point. So if you're waiting,
I'll be saving the chat as well.
Barbara, do you see that?
Yeah, I see that. Thank you. But you'll be sending it anyway?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you. As well as a link to this video.
Yes.
Okay, terrific.
And
Thank you.
make sure you stay until the end because I'll also be sending in a post survey for everybody to
Go
fill
ahead and
out.
put the survey in the chat
yeah.
now so that don't
Yeah.
wait all the way till the end. And that way people who can, click on the link.
Yeah, well, Crystal, can you put in the survey in the chat? And at the end of the questions, I'll also be promoting the next Green at Home workshop and other Actera events. But let's jump into the next question.
Excuse me, can I ask a question? This is Stephanie.
Yes.
Here, so one of the barriers I know for and frustrations could be sometimes is filling out the paperwork, especially when you're stacking discounts and rebates. Did you find it was pretty challenging for you, or was it pretty straightforward? Did you do any stacking?
Yeah, the good and the bad news is in 2019 there were 0 rebates. So I didn't do any paperwork and I got no money. That was the sad thing. No paperwork was a good thing, but I'd rather do paperwork and get money.
Right.
And it is going to be complicated because each jurisdiction is different. But the $3,100 Tech Clean California program I mentioned to you is a contractor applied program where the money's given by the state to the contractor and they have to pass it through to you. So they're doing the paperwork for you. So as long as you use an authorized contractor, then that one comes to you straight. And again, each depends on where you live. You'd have to check, but every jurisdiction will require some evidence that you actually did install it, right? And so on and so forth. There will be paperwork involved.
And that's a great question. And for Peninsula Clean Energy's rebate, it's not required that you go through a Bay Run contractor, but if you do, then they will do your paperwork and the application for both the Bay Run and the Peninsula Clean Energy rebate.
Sorry,
Thanks, Vanessa.
Yeah, thank you. I'm scrolling through the chat. There's a lot of good conversation.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Now you see why I'm excited about this, right? Who thought you could get a free advanced heat pump water heater, except for the news yesterday? That's fantastic news. So even if you don't live in San Mateo, there are other counties that offer a little bit, and you could certainly get very, very significant discounts now.
So how long is the stainless steel tank warranty?
Oh gosh, I used to know that, but off the top of my head, I can't quite remember. I'll type the name in the chat. Of my brand is called the Sanco 2. The Sanco 2 heat pump water heater. It's a little bit more expensive. So instead of $6,000, it's probably $8,000 or $9,000. But it does have that stainless tank, which is much more expensive. And it also runs as its refrigerant. It uses carbon dioxide as the refrigerant, which has a global warming potential of equal to 1, whereas many of the other refrigerants have high global warming potential. And I just wanted to give my business to a company that had sort of innovated around the refrigerants area and use CO2 as what we call a natural refrigerant. But yeah, that's just I think a minor point.
And I scrolled through all the questions. It seems like some were answered in the chat. Just wanted to double check that everybody has submitted their question, or if you want to ask a question right now, you can raise your hand.
Who is quitcarbon.com?
Yep, quitcarbon.com is a company in the Bay Area that provides advice on how to convert from gas, your home from gas to electric. I believe they provide services not just in hot water heaters, but also air conditioning and maybe even others. But it's a for-profit company, and they are, I believe there's no cost of their services to homeowners, and they receive their fees from the providers. And they are not affiliated with me or Peninsula Clean Energy or Actera. They Cooper and Quit Carbon are a participant like everybody else in this chat.
Thank you.
And double checking again, final questions before I thank our speakers and thank everyone for coming and show off our upcoming events.
Go ahead. Thank everybody for hanging out this late and asking all those detailed questions. I hope it got you interested in this topic. It is a little bit complicated, but just the takeaway is there's plenty of money out there right now. And so, it's a great time to make the switch. And so good luck to all of you. Thank you for your interest, and I hope you change over, and then I hope you tell your friends about it. We'll see you next time.